Good evening, everybody. Believe it or not, I actually welcome these forums. It's not easy, ever. I certainly don't think it's going to be easy tonight. But I do really relish the opportunity to actually speak directly to some of our core supporters. You're very influential in terms of how people view us, in terms of our other supporters view us. And I think it's very important that if you have got concerns, if you are unclear about certain aspects of what we are doing, then in these forums we can actually talk directly about it. If we start really from the time that I came into to the organisation at the start of last season, I inherited a squad of 38 players, professional players. Attached to that were some academy players. Now, within any squad, what you tend to get is almost three tiers. You get your top-end professionals, your real nuggets, your real players that you want to hold on to, are a big part of what any team is. People like your Stephen Jones, people like Mark Jones, Simon Easterby. Now, those are the guys who really are the heart and soul of any team. You then tend to have a middle tier of players. And that middle tier of players is made up of a number of type of players. Some players who may be coming to the end of their career, who have been a part of the region or the club for some time. And then below that, your third tier is your young aspiring players. Now, when I came into the squad, what was evident to me was that middle tier of players was too thick. We had too many of that type of player. Whatever would have happened last season, I was keen to change the makeup and the look of that squad to make sure that we got rid of that middle tier, that middle band, held on to as many of that top-end players as we could, and by getting rid of a large chunk of that middle tier, it also frees up some resources to maybe buy some of the more of those top-end players. But most importantly, would allow our younger talent to come through and be given the opportunity to actually show what they're capable of. Throughout the season, and by the end of the season, we released 13 players. Through that period as well, was the move across to this place. The one thing we can't lose sight of is the facility that we have here. It's come at a cost, it's come at a very difficult time, not only for us, for everybody in the UK financially. And as a result of it, both myself and Gareth worked very hard in terms of getting to grips with where the costs were of the business. And I say the business, I'm looking at the rugby side of the business, which inevitably is the highest cost within the business. The work and the investigative work that myself and Gareth did in terms of identifying Davies, Damien and Andy Fenby was quite exhaustive as well. We had to make sure that these guys, they're not big names, they weren't big names. I think moving forward they might well become big names. And Warren Gatland paid me a visit this afternoon to talk about a couple of things. One of the things that he was talking about is the crop of our younger players. He was very excited by a number of those players, including Ken, including Davies and including Andy. And I think they're not too far away from his thinking moving forward. And, I think they're announcing the squad on Sunday, and I expect us to have a reasonable representation there. And that's as a result of these boys being given the opportunity and actually developing in the only arena that they can, and that's up on the rugby field. What I'm showing you there is part of the planning for any new season is just identifying what our team is, what we believe our first team to be. So you'll see that there's 4 columns there. The first column is, as we planned this time last year, what we felt would be our first team started the season and in the big games. It's not always, it's never 100% accurate, and form changes, injuries occur, but we have to start somewhere. That's how we plan. If you look at that first team in particular, within that team, we identify a spine of our side. And those are the players that are going to be very important to us. The more times they play, the more impacting they'll be on the team. They've got a lot of experience, a lot of quality, and a lot of ability. Behind that then, we have the guys that sort of back that up, who support that. as I say, that can fluctuate, it does change. But we have to start somewhere, and that's our plan at the start of the season. What has happened this year is that as a result of injuries and unavailability, a lot of those guys in that second column there have actually moved across to that first column, and they have been fronting up for us. Maybe a little bit earlier in a couple of occasions than we would have liked. And as I say, it's brought a certain amount of inexperience into the team, and sometimes that can disrupt things. On the flip side to that, what those guys have got now is they're a year further down the road. They've had a lot of experience playing at the top end of the game in Europe, and I think we can certainly start to see the quality of some of these people coming through. If you think Ken has had a lot of exposure this year, and we've seen Ken probably having one of his first full seasons of rugby actually maturing. I think Josh, Rob McCusker in particular, two back row forwards of genuine quality now. These guys have really matured for us this year. They've competed against some of the best back row forwards in Europe. Physically, they are ready for it now. Mentally, they are ready for it now. And moving forward, these guys are going to be a big part of the Scarlets, without a shadow of a doubt. But when you look at our season, it's been hugely frustrating for all of us, no doubt. As it says up there, in the Magnus League, which is the most disappointing tournament that we've been in, 8 of our games were lost by 7 points or fewer. And that doesn't include our game against the Ospreys away, when they scored that last minute try when we were attacking, could have got something out of that game. I'm not saying for 1 minute, that's acceptable. And it isn't acceptable, and we won't accept that, because if we accept failure, if we accept losses, then we won't be able to drive ourselves forward. As it's got there as well, if we won 4 more games in the Magnus League, we'd have been in the top half of it, and arguably, because we would have beaten some of the teams in the top 4, we would have been in the playoffs, having won 4 more games. So the margins that we're playing with here are very tight, they're very small. Unfortunately, we've come out on the wrong side of those margins far too many times this season. That's why we're at the bottom end of the table. What I would say, in terms of our European campaign, I was very positive about how we were able to go from 2 seasons ago not winning 1 game to actually winning 4 out of 6 games in a very difficult pool against some quality opposition. The LV, again, I think there were a lot of positives in there. We let ourselves down on 1 occasion here against the Blues. Well, we let ourselves down a couple of occasions out here against the Blues, but in the LV we did here. But we were still ahead breast from qualifying, and the results didn't go away. We can't always rely on the results, and we've got to manage our own destiny. But we were unlucky not to get to a semi-final there. As we look forward to next season, and again, a lot of what we're talking about here is a consequence of where we are with our budgets. So we started season before last with 38 full-time players. We started this season with 32, supplemented by development players. We'll be starting this season with 30 full-time professional players, supplemented by 10 development players. What I'm excited about is 2 things. Is that firstly, we have secured the services of the senior players that we want. And secondly, that a lot of these younger players and this new wave of development players are genuine quality players. You can see that the squad next year is, the mix of ages is quite interesting. There's a lot of younger players within that group of that squad that we have. That's the challenge. Now, that is the challenge for us, and it's not easy, but as I said at the start, I'm not going to run away from it. I believe completely it's the right thing that we're doing here. And I believe that we're not far away, when you look at some of those results, we're really not far away from being a lot more competitive than we've been this season. And, speaking about it in some detail with Warren Gatland earlier, he said that to me without any prompt. He said he felt that we weren't that far away, and particularly with the youngsters that we're developing. He felt that within a season or 2, this side could really do something special.